Pleasure to be here, and we'll have to spend a few minutes with you, and appreciate the opportunity because I guess it allows me to sort of fulfill the obligation that all of us have at this particular time as Jews to prepare for this incredible Chag coming up. And it's a Chag that we all enjoy. I guess really it's sort of this very interesting sort of dilemma, or we can all speculate as to why this is true. Why is it that of all the events of the entire year, the Seder night is the one event that's most attended, most involved in terms of statistically the Jewish people? We all seem to gravitate, or many of us seem to gravitate to this more than almost anything else. I'm talking about. Well, that's sort of right. It's a good question. That's sort of the question I'm posing. Okay, so I guess we agree that it's something to think about. And again, I don't think you can give it a definitive answer. I think it's something to think about, and maybe some of the things we're going to share might get to the core of maybe this almost subconscious underlying emotion that every Jew has in understanding how critical this particular yontif is. And we can talk about the fun, because it's fun to have a Seder, and we can talk about, we can joke about the 4 cups of wine, and all other things that go on with the afikomen, all types of different aspects that are certainly fun and are inviting, but certainly we know that it runs much deeper than that. And the yontif of Pesach really involves something so basic that even the punishments, we don't like to talk about punishment too much, and it's really not that relevant today because we don't have punishments based on an official bet din. We don't have that kind of system yet. We're hoping when Mashiach comes, Bez Hashem, that we'll have that system back. But right now we are sort of still functioning within the system of the society that we live in. But we know that there's a tremendous amount of severity attached to this yontif. So it's not just fun and games. There's some serious business going on that we have to focus in on. And I want to share with you, it could be it's Ramban that you've learned before. And we have till about 7:30 or so. Sounds good? Okay. So, and it's so important. And I'm sort of going to pick out certain pieces. The Ramban we do have now in English. I would really recommend this Ramban sort of stay with us throughout the year. It's Nachmanides, and there is an English translation by Art Scroll that's great. We can. It's the very last Ramban. It's a very famous one. The very last Ramban in Parshas Bo. And I'm not going to sit there read the Hebrew with you and translate, but let me just sort of paraphrase and sort of give you a synopsis a little bit. That the Ramban says the reason why so many of our commandments are connected to the idea of going out of Egypt. We think about it, so many things that we do, whether it's a mezuzah, whether it's the men wearing tzitzis and tefillin, the kiddush that we make every Friday night and during the holidays. We have a constant refrain, Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim. Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now, what is this remembrance of the going out of Egypt, the Exodus? What is so important about the Exodus? And we need to understand, we keep bringing it back, and I can sort of almost understand a little bit of a frustration or negativity. Enough with the ancient history. I mean, we're living in the 21st century nowadays. Why we keep going back to the Exodus? We can barely relate to it, and sadly, the only thing we do relate to the Exodus is some Cecil B. DeMille movie called The 10 Commandments that's on, I think, once or twice a year that everyone likes to go back and watch, and even that. What?
The book was better.
I think the book was much better. Even Spielberg's version, which is not quite 100%, it's still I think better. Although I can't say I really saw the whole thing, but that's even a distortion of the reality. So clearly there's something about this that we need to get clear. And the Ramban says that the reason is because this moment in time, this period of God going to Moshe Rabbeinu and telling him, I'm going to take the Jewish people out and I'm going to perform miracles. This was not some kind of grand show that God wanted to put on just for the sake of impressing everybody. God's not in the business of impressing people, and And that's why it hasn't happened again. This is not some kind of, sideshow that, that God performs every once in a while to make sure everyone remembers, how special He is. I mean, that's not what God's about, and He has no ego and He has no interest in that. Whatever God does is for us. Whatever God does in relating to this world is for the benefit of mankind, and specifically as relates to Jews, for the benefit of the Jewish people. And we need to remember that in anything that we ever encounter, whether it be sacrifices, whether it be prayer, all the things that kids, and I deal with teenagers, most of the day, and most of my life. I'm at Valley Torah High School, so obviously I deal with other people as well, but I'm sort of joined at the hip to the teenage world, and teenagers very often sort of think in those terms, like, why does God need this for? And God doesn't need it. We need it. And God gives us opportunities through what He does for us to gain. And what exactly did He give us here? So the Ramban says, because there are different attitudes and thoughts that come into the world. There are different philosophies, different isms that crop up in the world. And certainly we're living in a time where, the liberalism versus the whole conservative business, we got politics going on, and so we're not touching that right now tonight, but you've got a lot of different socialisms and Zionisms and communisms and you name it. There's an ism for, almost every movement, and in those types of desires for people to establish thoughts and philosophies about the way the world runs, the Ramban says, Nachmanides tells us, there are people who believed in various ways of the way God relates to the world. God made the world and He left it. Or there is no God and this world was always here. It's interesting that he mentioned, and what I'm telling you is basically in this piece, but it's very interesting. And again, I'm certainly no science expert, but a little bit of, I pick up little things here and there. And this notion that he mentioned that the world was always here, from what I understand, was really the prevailing scientific perspective of how you deal with the beginning of the world. Because, right, the age-old question, how did this world get here? And one of the answers that made scientists feel very comfortable was, it was always here. It didn't get here, it was always here. Now, that might not sit well with us, but again, must be if so many brilliant scientists over the centuries thought that way, must be there is a sort of a, somewhat of an acceptable intellectual position, as much as, I personally have trouble with. But let's sort of accept it for a minute. But the reality is that was blown out of the water, in the past century, because scientists discovered that the universe is ever expanding. And if it's ever expanding, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That means that there had to be an energy that's spreading it out. That means there had to be an initial force. If something was always here, then there's no ability to explain how it could be moving, how it could be expanding. It is what it is. It was always here. Once you see that it's moving in certain directions, in all directions, and it's moving at a incredible pace, which is what's going on out there, light years away, just beyond our ability to just fathom. It's just so amazing the way God made this world and how He made it. But that clearly debunks that notion that the world was always here. No, it's not true. If it was always here, it wouldn't be moving, it wouldn't be expanding, and it is expanding. So that's just one way. But the Ramban says, so there are different philosophies out there. God is He didn't just sort of set the clock and put the earth in natural motion, which is one philosophy, or there is no God at all, or maybe God is still involved to some degree, but not in the little details. He's only involved in the big picture of the thing. The little minutiae stuff, He doesn't have time for. So what I wear today, or whether or not I just came back from a devastating loss yesterday in Sarachek when the Torah lost to Shalhevet by 2 points in overtime, and it was, trust me, it was not easy. I'm waiting 25 years to win this tournament, and it still hasn't happened. But bottom line is, we played our hearts out, and when we were in the van, and I'm in the van driving half the team, very sad, dejected team, and I said, listen, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has blessed Valley Torah in so many ways. It's not in the cards. God decided it wasn't in the cards for us to be blessed in this additional way. We have so many brachas. So who says we're entitled to this bracha? We didn't get it, Oh, Rabbi, get out of here! Don't talk that way. That's no. God has nothing to do with this basketball. Oh, slow down. What makes you think God has nothing to do with basketball? Because we're involved in it. Of course, God has something to do with basketball. Now, he can't tell you, he maybe doesn't make you dribble or not dribble, but he can certainly determine whether the shot, you took, whether it hits the rim and bounces in or it hits the rim and bounces out. It's a fraction of a second. So God's involved with everything. But that's something that's not so easy to come to grips with. And God said, I'm going to do this once and pretty much for eternity. That I'm going to perform miracles and establish my identity in this world in a way that is unquestionable. There'll be no way for anybody living in today's world, in the time of the year 2448, nobody could be living at that time and see what God did to the Jewish people, with the Jewish people, and for the Jewish people, and not understand that God runs the world. And He's intimately involved in our lives. From every plague, we're not going to go through all the details, but from every plague that He did, and certainly the way the splitting of the sea, and of course during the time of giving of the Torah. This was a way for us, collectively, the Jewish people, to have an indelible imprint on our minds and our hearts and our souls that there's a God in this world, and He cares about us, and He's involved with us. And He says, and the Ramban tells us, and that's why we have all of the mitzvos for the purpose of remembering back to that moment in time, because that's the moment in time that removed all possible doubt in the world as to what kind of God we have in this world and what kind of God we have to relate to. And by doing all these mitzvos and talking specifically about Yetzias Mitzrayim and talking about going out and going through the whole story of the Exodus, we are absolutely confirming. And he says every time we go to the doorpost and put up a mezuzah, he says we put a nail in the mezuzah, or we are testifying to, we don't think about it maybe. We don't really, unfortunately, we go through life so fast, there's so much in the fast lane that we're running through mitzvahs without stopping and reflecting about what that mitzvah is about. But while there are certainly Kabbalistic ideas, and Maimonides was, interestingly enough, a Kabbalist, with all of his Kabbalistic depth of understanding, he breaks down life into such a fundamentally basic and almost simple point. It almost sounds simplistic. And he says amazing words. He says, the entire purpose of creation and all the mitzvahs in the Torah were given to us for this one specific goal.
One specific goal
being to come to recognition that God runs the world. That's what it's all about. That God runs the world. Hello, you ask any 13-year-old kid, you ask any 12-year-old girl, bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, that's Rabbi Avrohom Wasserman's famous question. And he writes in the Kovitz Mamorim, he says, you have a 12-year-old girl, you have a 13-year-old boy, and you say, today you are a man, today you're a young lady who entered into the official fold of the Jewish people, you have your party, everything's great, and you say to this kid, so now you're obligated in all the commandments. And one of those commandments is to believe in God. See, his question is, you can command somebody to believe in God? The great philosophers, Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, are roaming around the world trying to figure out is there a God in the world? You expect a 13-year-old kid to get it straight, and Rabbi Avrohom Wasserman explains that basically we could get it straight if we took away all of the internal factors that somehow blind us, all of the inner workings of our desires and our egos and all other factors that get in the way. We looked at the world completely objectively. We looked around, we looked into a molecule, we looked at DNA, we look at the eye, we look at a banana, you look at whatever, a carrot, and you analyze all of the things going on in the world, you would come to the recognition that there's a God in the world. But a lot of things get in the way, and even an Aristotle and a Plato could not get it straight if you allow different things to blind you. But so apparently, what seems so simple, and this is really the thing that we need to remember today, the night of Passover, and all year long, but apparently the night of Pesach is the night where it's uniquely solidified in our hearts that we have to sort of go through that concept. We have to internalize that idea of all of the pomp and circumstance, all of the incredible things that went on during this period of time when we went out of Egypt, and the incredible Makas Bechoros, where the firstborn of the Egyptians were killed, and we escaped because we had the blood on the doorpost. All of that is about one seemingly simple idea that's not simple at all: that God truly runs the world. And I'm not a big moviegoer, and I almost never quote movies. But there's one scene that I've mentioned. I sort of went out of my comfort level, and I share this with my students as well. But there's one scene that I remember from the Indiana Jones movie. It's really what? I love them. Okay, good. So you'll fill us in on the details. So, but there was one scene. I think it was Raiders of the Lost. I'm not sure which one, but I know there were three of them. I think, right? So, and this one. It was when he was back, pretty much he's running away from the enemy and is trying to run away for his life, and he has to pass through different tests or different challenges and different hints, and he gets to a point where they're coming, the bad guys are coming at him, and he gets to an opening, and there's a tremendous ledge, there's a mountain 100 feet on the other side, he's got nowhere to go, and he's going to die. If I walk over this cliff, I'm going to drop 1,000 feet. I'm finished. I'm chopped meat, literally. And if I stay here, whoever was running after him are going to kill me. And the clue for this particular moment, this point in the process, was leap of faith. So leap of faith. And he's trying to figure it out. And remember, right? It's so powerful, and it was such an amazing lesson. I guess Spielberg, he has some depth to him, and so he puts his foot out. And he's still established on terra firma on the first, and he puts his foot out, and he saw to feel maybe there's something there. Nothing happens, because he's still a leap of faith. So he recognizes the only way I'm going to get out of this, if I lean my body and my leg forward enough that there's no point of return, that I'm done for. When I'm ready to take that leap of faith, where I absolutely am convinced that I'm going to be saved by something appearing that's going to catch my foot, only then am I going to get out of here. And it took him a few seconds. He had to really compose himself as the enemy's getting closer. Leap of faith. And he does it. And just as his body is going over the edge where he cannot go back anymore, something miraculously appears, sort of this bridge appears out of nowhere, and his leg lands on that as his body is lunging forward, and that's how he's able to get to the other side. And that scene sort of really, I think, concretizes a very fundamental point, that the word belief is belief in God. We all, maybe, I don't know for sure, but I imagine that, right, if we took a little vote right now, who believes in God, let's assume that all of us would raise our hands, okay? Let's assume that. We don't have to put anybody on the spot. Let's all assume we raise our hands. Does that mean that we all have the same level of belief? No. And does that mean that whatever belief we have today, let's say we would pass a lie detector test right now, if somebody would strap us on, do you believe in God? And the answer that would be affirmative. Does that mean we're going to have the same level of commitment tomorrow? Or the next week, because we see how we're funny. We're people. We're human beings. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sort of understood that in the vicissitudes of life, faith and true commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to God, is not simple. And that leap of faith, we can go through the motion and say, if you asked that guy, right, 10 minutes before he got to that ledge, you believe in God, he would have said, that's what he was going through, all of, it was the Holy Grail, whatever he was going for, or the Ark, right, Raiders of the Lost Ark, so he was going after the Ark, so he would have said, I believe, but clearly he didn't really believe, he didn't get himself to that point where he was really fully ready to go over the edge until he really focused and said, and internalized and said, no, this is for real. I'm putting my life on the line. And this is where certain Jews throughout our long and unfortunate bloody history put their life on the line and had that visceral clarity in their own total conviction in the depths of their soul. Of course there's a God in the world. And therefore I have no question that if I'm presented with the challenge of giving up my fundamental commitment to Judaism, or dying, I'm going to take death over that, because there's no point in living, and God wants us, when He puts us in that situation, that's what unfortunately God has sort of given us that mandate, that there are certain times that, yes, you give up your life, you say that Shema Yisrael, and we see throughout history, people were able to rise to that challenge, and other people were not, and it really boils down to this basic point. And what the Ramban is telling us is that that's why we have the mitzvos. That's why we do all that we do. I always thought it was the reverse. because we believe in God, and God then gave us the mitzvos. That's why we do them. We do the commandments because we believe in God, and if we believe that the commandments have some purpose, some deeper purpose, and they certainly might have a deeper purpose. But the Ramban sort of shifts it and turns it around. He says, no. God gave us the mitzvos so that we can believe in Him, so that we can be reminded at every single point in our lives that there is a God in the world. So that when a man does put on, now we need it more than you guys do. That's why we have more commandments than women do, because women don't need that constant daily reminder of learning Torah to the extent that a man is supposed to learn Torah, and the tefillin and the tzitzis and the talis that we wear, we need those reminders on a daily basis, right? We have the yarmulke, you don't, right? Why? Because, I always say this to the guys, we're the shmendriks who've got this, different challenge of it where, and it's because we have to admit it, we don't like saying it, but we are inferior to him, and it's just no two ways around it. That's just reality. I never understood what this whole feminist movement was about, because you want to be like men? What is that about? I mean, we're almost bemoaning the fact that we don't have that inner connection to God that women almost naturally, not naturally, have to work on it too, but you have it on a much deeper level. That's why tefillah is sort of within the purview of women in a way that's more unique to them than it is to even men, because of that connection, that purity of the soul. So we all have the challenge. We have it in a greater level, and that's why we need more mitzvos. But when we do these mitzvos, and we all have the obligation of the Seder, we all have the obligation for these commandments, certainly the night of Pesach, because this is a time the Ramban says we have to go back to basics and reconnect and reinforce this fundamental principle. This principle that, of course, paying lip service is not the point. We can all say it. It's about that leap of faith. It's about that readiness to commit 1,000% and to feel it on an absolute, deep, visceral level that there's a God in the world. And He's connected to me. And He's involved with me. And if we had that, we would so relate to the world so differently. Our decision-making would be so different. I think I was a different subject, but I think I shared it in this room, the typical, the guy's driving looking for a parking spot for a very important business meeting, and it's 5 minutes to 9, and he's got to be in that office at 9 o'clock, and if he doesn't, this is literally his biggest opportunity. He says, God, please, I need a parking spot, let me find a parking spot. I just have a couple minutes to go. Please, God, if I find a parking spot, I promise, God, I will never speak, and he's about to say Lashon Hara again, okay, and just then, a car pulls out, right in front of the building. Oh, he says, "Oh, never mind, God. I just found the spot. It's okay. Never mind." That's what we do. It's like we're connected. We're with it. We're talking to God, and all of a sudden, never mind, God. It's all good, and you're not my life anymore. I'm back to my regular routine, and life goes back. So we're funny that way. So Ramban is telling us, don't think for a second. And this is really, when you think about it, when you hear these, I'm more in the world of education, but I do sort of dabble in sort of that other world of Rabbanus, and because I sort of wear a couple of different hats, and I do go to some of these rabbinic conferences, not just the educational conferences. And what's interesting when you listen to the rabbinic conferences of what the challenges that rabbis find in their synagogues throughout America, the new challenge over the last 10 years or 15 years, as opposed to maybe 20 years ago, where the hot button subject was kids at risk, where this trend of kids moving away from Judaism and going off the path and veering away. And again, it was a small percentage, but certainly whatever percentage it was too significant. It was a big problem. And not to say it hasn't gone away, but maybe that old problem is sort of begot a new problem of the disconnected adult, where people coming and there's no feeling and there's no connection, there's no emotion. They come to synagogue maybe because they feel they have to, because they sort of have to go through the motions, but there's no feeling, there's no connection. And they go, they're sitting in shul, they're sitting there in synagogue, and they're not really talking to God, and they're just they're sort of existing. They're a shell of a Jew without the essence, without the real, salt and pepper of what it's really all about, that real flavor of connecting and feeling that love of God in our lives. And therefore, the Ramban tells us, if you're doing a mitzvah and you don't feel that love, you don't feel that connection, you don't feel that commitment to do this because God is here in the world with me, by my side, every single step of the way, you really haven't done what the Torah and what God wants of us. We sort of missed the boat. it's a scary thought because while it might seem very simple, it really is not so simple. That means the challenge for all of us as we go through life is to not allow the ups and downs, not to allow a moment of forgetfulness where, God forbid, we can go through a day where we're sort of reverting back, to the reality. You had a question?
I did have a question.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I just have such a hard time with this paradigm shift because it's so not the way that we're normally thinking of our mitzvos and our Torah and everything. But you said that God gave us the mitzvahs so that we can believe in Him.
Absolutely.
What does that mean exactly? I'm having such a hard. I'm sorry to ask such a rudimentary question.
No, it's great. No, I'm glad you're asking it again. Because this is what the Ramban is telling us. And again, that's why I recommend if you have the time to read it, whether it be in the Hebrew, whether it be in English, to look at this and to really internalize these principles because they're radical. As simple as they are, they're radical in terms of our thinking, our typical thinking. But what he's saying is, and what I think he really means, and you can look at it yourself and analyze it. But what I think what he's saying is that it needs constant reinforcement. The real purpose of our being here, think about it. What's Gan Eden? What's this world to come? And sort of we're no experts because we don't remember ever being there, and we're here in this world, so we're limited in our ability to comprehend. But a little bit, if we dabble in the Mesilas Yesharim and look into what the Mussar Svarim, the books of Mussar and the books of Kabbalah talk about, they say to us, eternal pleasure is about a eternal bonding, okay, an unlimited and absolute bonding with God. So really, when you talk about the ultimate pleasure, now we can't relate to it because we're physical beings and we have physical aspects about our lives that sort of block that appreciation. But a little bit, we know that when we think about the holiest moments of our lives, the moments that we felt the closest to God, there was something deep and so pleasurable and so significant about those moments where we feel so uplifted, so connected. So if we sort of make the paradigm shift, that's it. That's the purpose. There's no other end other than that feeling and bonding between a Jew and his Creator. That's it. That's all the purpose is. But the only point is, I think what the Ramban is saying to us, that is the purpose. And if we can sort of hold that moment in time and take whatever holy moment, whatever moment we had this epiphany where we absolutely knew that there was a God in the world, and we just couldn't feel more euphoric in our love, in our connection to Him, in our appreciation of God, if we can freeze that moment, there wouldn't be any need for mitzvos because we're at the epitome, we're at the top. But what he's saying is, we can't do that. That's not the way God made the world. God made the world that we have to go out and get a job, and we have to, raise kids, and we have to have challenges. So how are we going to keep that feeling? How are we going to maintain that connection? The mitzvos were there to maintain that connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, that's why when you think about it, to perform a mitzvah without that feeling, without that understanding, without that appreciation, we're totally missing the boat. And that's why, it's so sad that, again, it's a whole other subject. I don't want to get on my soapbox and start, preaching about it. But it's so sad that when we as parents, and most of us are not parents in the room, but Bez Hashem, you will be one day. When we as parents are sort of just comfortable with our kids fitting into the mold and going through the motions, and just put the hat on and just do the mitzvah, and of course you have to do it. That's not negotiable. But the idea that we almost don't see the vibrancy and the excitement and the feeling and the connection of what we're doing as an integral part of what we're doing, we almost sort of disconnect the action from the emotions behind it. We're doing a tremendous disservice. Okay, and that's why I once heard from a very wise man, if it was up to him, he said, no one's going to listen to me, but a very wise man from Ney Yisrael, when I was one of these Torah Masorah conventions, he said, it was up to me, I would not have younger kids davening. I would not have 5-year-old, 6-year-old kids davening. Right? Why not? Because what? So what are they doing? What are you training yourself when you're in 4th grade and you're just shuckling away and shaking back and forth and screaming davening by heart? What are you really training yourself? Do you know what exactly? Okay, just say the words, go through the motion, and then so what are we doing when we're 14? Saying the words, go through the motion. Now again, you find some kids who are but think about look around. And look how many people, it's so rare to see somebody who truly has, again, girls are better at it. They have that special gift. But really, when you look at the men's side, you see a lot of people who just, I call it, I joke with the guys, the Shmona Esrei shuffle. You take 3 steps back, you look around, I think I'm done now, I can sit down. And I'm just literally just going through the motions. So what Ramban is telling us by saying the purpose of the entire creation and the purpose of all of the mitzvahs is for us to know that there's a God in the world and to thank Him for the breath of life that we have. And that really is what it's all about. And therefore, and everything else that we do is all to bring us back to that moment of clarity. And which really is almost a perfect segue to the next world. Because what the next world is all about is the ultimate recognition that there's a God in the world, because we're literally bonding with God. Our souls become reunited with Hashem, and that takes us to the next level where we don't have the physical body that sort of is the blockage between us and God. So getting back to the night of Pesach, when we connect on that level, and I can argue, and again, this is all, it's my gut feeling, and I could be wrong, but I believe that what drags us to that Seder, and I'm not talking about, obviously, the religious Jews are there because they need to be there. Maybe we don't realize this well enough that makes us run there and get excited to be there. But even the secular Jews who maybe are going, afterwards, and they're not gonna not have bread the rest of the week. They're not ready to fully commit to the laws of the Torah. But there's something that draws them to that Seder, because when we go through those motions, so to speak, those elements of confirming that God took us out of Egypt, and how did He take us out? With all of the glory, to make it very clear to us that there is an intimate God in this world. He's not dispassionate, He's not removed, He's not distant. He is with me every step of the way in my life. And when we recognize that, and when we testify to that fact, that makes this night very unique, because it's a night that we don't just sort of feel it and think it, we live it, we communicate it, we talk about it with our children. That's why it's very, we have an obligation, the Jew does, every single day to remember going out of Egypt. So the famous question that all the rabbis ask, so what's the big deal about the night of the Seder? Night of the Seder we remember, and the night of every single night of the year we remember. We say Shema every single day. In Shema, we reference the going out of Egypt. What makes the night of Pesach so different than every other night? And which is essentially the question of Manishtara. And the answer is because every other night we remember. This night, V'higadata levincha. We are told to talk, to discuss, to have a conversation. So when we are at that Seder, and we're part of that conversation, we're part of those questions, we're part of all of the things that are going on, sure, they're cute and they're nice, and let's get to the matzah balls, I'm hungry, all the stuff that we all deal with, and all the Seders that we have, I think there's a subconscious reality that we're the Jewish people, and our history is completely unique, and our relationship with God is something that nobody can possibly fathom and understand, only we do. And I'm not sure we fully recognize it, but I believe that's the burning connection to every single Jew to the night of the Seder, is this connection to this unmistakable fact that God runs the world. And it's simplistic on one level, but clearly very, very complicated and very deep on another level, because you see how things move during the year. You see how things can, challenges come up, and we could forget, we could have moments when we don't even feel like praying. We don't want to pray because we feel it, and that's what some of these kids said yesterday. As if for a 16-year-old kid who was dying to win a championship, and he says, I prayed so hard to God. How come, why didn't He answer me? Why didn't I win? Then you have the other, right? So some people say God has nothing to do with basketball. The other kid was saying, God has everything to do with it, so why didn't He give it to me? I prayed for it real hard. And, I said, He might have decided to save that prayer for something maybe a little bit more important than basketball. Something that you really, really are going to need one day. And let that prayer...
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
What? So, I mean that...
This
so,
is what you do when you teach girls. That's so beautiful. I love that.
We have a girls' school too. I know it. I know the feeling. Anyway.
Hashem's doing this just to make it feel better from last night's drive home.
It was in New York. I also flew and throughout the night to get here back.
It was in New York?
Yeah.
The championship?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a big deal. There are 20 teams from all over the country. It's called the Sarachek tournament. And we were in the final game, and we had a 15-point lead, and they caught up. Shalhevet caught with us against Shalhevet. Two LA teams have to travel 3,000 miles to play each other. It was great. It was unbelievable. It was crazy. It was really exciting and crazy and frustrating and the more it was everything wrapped up in one. You had all emotions going on within an hour and a half, every possible emotion you can ever imagine. But to a kid, that's a question. And listen, we have that question on a more sophisticated level, and we pray for really important things, and we sometimes get the answer no, that we don't like that answer, and then we start feeling distant again from God, and we start forgetting that He didn't leave, He didn't walk away. He's just saying no.
I was just wondering. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful that the head of the school would accompany the boys to the basketball game, but with all due respect, Rabbi Stulberger is not their coach. So what was the idea? Did Rabbi Stulberger just want to be with them, or was afraid this might happen and
Well, no, yeah, it's basically that. In other words, it's a unique opportunity. I mean, there are many different reasons. I don't go every single year, but I go most years. But Rabbi. It's a little bit of a tangent. Rabbi Herschel Fried, who's a very renowned educator on the East Coast, and he was the Hasidic fellow with a long beard, and they hired him to take over a school in Cleveland many years ago. And this school in Cleveland always had a tough time getting off there. It's still there, and now it's got new leadership, but at the time it was going through a crisis like it was going through for many different times. And the crisis was that the rabbis of the school were very religious, and they had a right-wing approach, and they wanted a very strong brand of Torah to be brought into the school, and the kids were more modern, okay? And they had this constant tension. So the rabbis, when they heard that the school hired Herschel Fried, they got, this is great, a Hasidic fellow. He's going to come in and set rules down. This school's going to move to the right, and it's going to be really great. They really were excited. So he made the first staff meeting, and all the rabbis were coming, waiting to hear all the new rules that are going to really, get this school straightened out. He said, okay, we're bringing some new rules into the school. They were all excited. Great, let me hear. So he said, rule number 1, all rebbeim must attend all basketball games. What? These were rabbis with beards and, serious Jews, and what? Says, basketball games? I got shurim, I got learning Torah. He says, if you want them to be interested in what you're interested in, you have to be interested in what they're interested in. So, first of all, a lot of these are my boys. I give this 12th grade shir. So a lot of these kids are my boys. But really, the experience of 5 days with almost 20 guys in New York gives me a unique opportunity to bond and to really show them how interested I am in what they're interested in, and hopefully it'll be a little bit reciprocal, and they'll be interested in what I'm interested in. So, but that's essentially the bottom line. That it's a great opportunity, and yes, I do have the many other responsibilities that I have. A lot of them I could still do there. It's 5 days and it's a lot of time, but that's really the main aspect is the bonding with the kids, and I think and they sort of have to see it from the top. If you just sort of send somebody else, it doesn't deliver the same message in as powerful a way. So that's pretty much the main reason anyway. So. Wow. Okay. Let's try to wrap it up. So therefore, it comes. So getting back, when if we have a Kadosh Baruch Hu on our minds at all times, which is really what the goal is, right? God gave us a lot of mitzvos, so that almost every part of the day we're reminded about God. It's the famous, beautiful Usher Wade story, which what drew him in his travels and his amazing journey from the Protestant church in Europe as a very high individual in the Protestant church to being a rabbi with a long beard giving classes in Yerushalayim in Israel, was that concept that he couldn't find a good answer. How do I be a good Christian? And when he got to Judaism, you want to be a good Jew? You got 60 years to learn Torah and figure it out, because Judaism it speaks to every single aspect of our lives. There's nothing we can do in Judaism that isn't spoken about by the laws, by the Jewish laws, to tell you how to do it in the way that's most connected to God. So if we think of this, of this concept, and we carry it with us throughout the year, get to solidify it the night of Seder. And this is really, when you think about true, what is redemption? What is the idea of freedom? Emancipation. If emancipation is simply the ability to just run after my desires, which a lot of people think freedom. Oh, if I had, if I won the lottery and I could just do whatever I want, I would really be free. No, you wouldn't be free. Okay, if you're dictated by your passions, if your passions rule you, you're not free. You're a slave to your passions. True emancipation is the ability to see the world for what it is, to be able to be strong enough to make the decisions you want to make that are truly in your best interest. Okay, when you have that, that cheesecake, after you've had a nice meal and you shouldn't have it. It's going to be with you for the rest of the night. It's going to, add a little, these are things that we're constantly battling on so many different levels, no matter what it might be. It could be weight, it could be smoking, it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be our character traits, our sensitivities, our humility, all these things that we have challenges with. If we had this ability to really feel and sense God in every single thing that goes on in this world, we'd be in a much better place. And that's why we have all of these commandments. And that's why this night needs to be so critical, because it's Zman Cheresenu. It's a time that God gave us the clarity and therefore the ability to make proper decisions, to do what we really want to do, to take control of our lives. Because we have a purpose, we have a mission. We're not floating. That's why all these isms that come up in the world really when you think about it, why are Jews so much at the forefront of all of these isms? And the answer is very simple. Because of a Jew's special soul, a Jew's soul and a Jew yearns for meaning, yearns for purpose. And if a person is not blessed with the clarity of Torah, with the understanding that this is the way to achieve the ultimate emancipation, the ultimate freedom, then the Jew will naturally be yearning for something else, and there'll be some other idea that will come up into that person's head, whether he's Marx or anybody else. All these various people that come up with these ideas, they're drawn to them because maybe this is going to give me purpose. Maybe this will give me a sense of satisfaction. Maybe I can save humanity this way. So save the whales, save this, save that. Become with all these different things that come up in people's philosophical bents of how do I achieve purpose? They're looking for something that we have, literally right here, right on our noses. It's called Torah. It's called a relationship with God. I'll just end with one, I love this story. It's a beautiful story, and it's not a story that directly relates to it, but I think you only can be this way if you have God at your side at all times. And so often when we get a little bit, when the pressure builds, and we get a little bit sort of, especially when we get territorial and selfish and, I want this, I need that, and, then we can forget about God. There's a beautiful story about that in Europe in the early 1900s, I believe it was, I think the Russians had made a rule that no Jews were allowed to bake matzah. And there was a certain Rebbe who baked matzah in his community and for the neighboring communities. But he only had enough for one matzah per person. And they came from all over. And there was a very, very holy man who lived in a neighboring town. And he came and he sent his son to the Rebbe to get matzah, and he said, my father sent me here and he asked me to get 2 matzahs. I said, I can't do it. I can't give you 2 matzahs. I only have enough for one per person. My father insisted. He said, absolutely, I cannot leave your house without getting 2 matzahs. And the Rebbe was getting a little annoyed. I said, but I can't. But what? My father's a holy man. He really wasn't happy, and very, very reluctantly, after I'm making a long story short, he gave me 2 matzahs, but he was really upset. Now it's a week before Pesach, and it was Erev Pesach, it was the day before Pesach, with a few hours to go, and all of a sudden, the boy goes back to the Rebbe's house and knocks on the Rebbe's door. The Rebbe opens the door and he sees the boy again. He says, I don't have any more matzah. I can't give you any more matzah. He says, no. My father didn't tell me for more matzah. My father knew that you would give away every single matzah that you had and you'd leave yourself with nothing. here I'm here to give you the matzah for you, that you can have matzah for Pesach as well. And he brought it back, and he gave it back to him. So, you can't think in those terms unless you have total clarity of what this world is about. You have to have God at your side every minute of the day to be able to reach that level. And when you think about it, these people were giants. They were spiritual giants, but their greatness really came from a sense of total clarity of the simple things that we sort of know, but maybe just don't know deeply enough. And that is that God runs the world. And that's what this night is about. That's what we hopefully will be celebrating a week from Friday night. And Bez Hashem, if we can get to that clarity, the month of Nisan is known to be the month of redemption, of Mashiach. And Hashem, we should be zocheh to Mashiach meher yameinu.